Hi, Jeff here. Well, looks like in Season 7, it took me exactly half a full episode to have occasion for a bonus episode. Get ready to listen to SFFILM's Director of Programming, Jessie Fairbanks, as she returns to the show to talk about this year's Doc Stories Documentary Film Festival, which runs October 17th through the 20th, with all screenings taking place at the Vogue Theater. Here's Jessie. I don't know if you knew this last year or if I've ever mentioned it to you, but Doc Stories 2023 is where I cut my teeth covering film festivals. It was my very first, and I'm hooked. I'm definitely, SF Film, CamFest, I Frameline. I'm covering as many, because we have a lot here in town, but I'm covering as many as I can. But Doc Stories will always be my first.
Oh,
So,
that's so sweet.
so
Yeah,
it's super meaningful.
there are a lot of organizations. There's over 100 film festivals in the Bay Area, so it's busy. It's great. It's so awesome that there's so many programs feeding different audiences. But really delighted to hear that you love our documentary festival. I'm particularly partial to it as well.
Okay, well, let's get into it. I one of the first things that caught my eye in this year's Doc Stories program was the documentary Janice and its return to the Bay Area, which so many connections in her life and in the movie. So, can we hear about that?
Sure. I think, when I started looking at the scope of what I wanted to do for the 10th anniversary, one of the things that I did was revisit what the intentionality had been when Doc Stories launched in 2015. It's a relatively young program compared to some of the other festivals that have been running for a long time, and yet it has been wildly successful. And so we wanted to make sure that we were honoring and celebrating the origin and genesis behind this event as we led the charge in curating a 10th anniversary edition. And three things really stood out to me in that when this was originally conceived by Noah Cowan, who's the previous executive director, and Rachel Rosen, who was the director of programming at the time, they were both really looking to capitalize on the fact that there is a large Bay Area-based documentary community, that they wanted to honor and celebrate short-form journalism in documentary in particular, and that they wanted to create a space for interrogation and discussion within the doc community. And so that was kind of what they started with, and they put together a really, really beautiful lineup of films for the first edition. And as I was looking through who was a part of it, filmmakers like Laura Poitras and Matt Heineman and Amy Berg were a part of the original edition. And so we were looking at what title would make the most sense for us to bring back, and to do, retrospective is a strong word because it's not that old of a film. But Janice Little Girl Blue by Amy Berg really just felt like a really celebratory film that takes a look at a beloved artist. Amy is really adept at putting together copious amounts of archival work. She's currently working on another music doc that's very exciting, that's been in the process for a long time, on Jeff Buckley. And so we talked a lot about that film. We talked about her intentionality behind Janice, and it just felt like a really lovely moment of synergy in terms of Janice being, the rollout for Janice was at a different time. And so now it's much easier for audiences to get access to films. And Janice really is a documentary that we want to provide a platform for, so it pops again for audiences. Obviously, Janice's connections with the Bay Area, and the fact that she, was very well known, but that she really came to kind of the height of her artistic power with the holding company here in the Bay Area. The fact that Amy had got Pat Power to provide the voiceover, that they got access to Janice's personal letters and diaries. There's just so much in there that's really beautiful. And so it felt like a great film to kind of kick off the 10th anniversary, celebrate the Bay Area, bring back a filmmaker who we really love and admire, and look at someone who was very iconic, both in terms of the music scene, but also in terms of where we're situated.
Awesome. And I believe Janis Joplin came from Texas. Is that correct?
She's originally from the Bay Area, but she did spend a lot of time in the Bay Area and
No,
talks.
no.
Yeah.
That just makes her exactly like me. I came here from Texas. So we're one and the same, so it means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's basically we were like, how can we find a film that maps Jeff's trajectory? But it is like also I think there's a lot of people that will identify with the idea that there are a lot of people that have come to San Francisco over the years as because it's such a cultural hub and have found themselves artistically. And that is an important reminder, I think, for a lot of people in the San Francisco and Bay Area community right now, that there's still a really rich and thriving artistic community, and that there's an incredibly long legacy of artists finding their people here in the Bay Area. And what a lovely message to have in this particular moment.
Absolutely. Okay, well, moving on, is it fair to say that at least an equal component to the actual movies of DocFest and SF Film is the lecture type, the talks, chats that you all have. One that caught my eye was the Building Solutions with Audience Demographics chat that you're going to have with Carrie Putnam. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So another thing I was chatting about earlier, how I was trying to approach the 10th anniversary edition in a way that felt celebratory and exciting, and also doesn't stray too far from the fact that it's a weekend long program. How do we make sure that we're presenting exciting, bold new documentary films to our audience? How do you achieve both of that when you have very limited space and time? And so one of the ways that felt exciting as an intersection to kind of look at both where Doc Stories has been, where the industry has been, and where are we moving forward collectively was to put together some conversations. Carrie Putnam, as many people know, is the former CEO of Sundance and has been working with the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy for the past year, working on surveying audiences in the US about their behavior, specifically with independent and documentary films. And no one has done this research before. Carrie did present earlier this year at IDA. She recently presented at Camden, but I believe that Doc Stories is her third presentation ever on this. So it's a really exciting moment to take a look at. It'll be weedy. We're going to be talking about data. It's very specific to our industry, but if we're trying to figure out how the documentary industry as a whole can move forward, given that our exhibition landscape feels like it's collapsing, there is a lack of funding for nonfiction films right now. There's a lot of filmmakers that are trying to get their product to market and are struggling. Over half the titles at Doc Stories this year have not yet been bought. That is very unusual for us. We have filmmakers that are self-distributing. We have filmmakers that are still really trying to get their film sold. And so having someone who can present us with kind of hard facts and data around what audiences are looking for in the nonfiction space, and what kind of documentaries they're engaging with, I think will be hugely helpful as we try to look forward. So we're first going to have a conversation with Carrie where she's going to present kind of top line audience demographic and data that's specific to the documentary field. And then that will lead into our second conversation, which is on Saturday, where Carrie will then join other architects and leaders in the documentary landscape, including Laura Kim, who is a producer and a well-known leader at Participant, which recently closed its doors. Carrie Lozano, also formerly from Sundance and now the head of ITVS. Justine Nagin, who is a celebrated and well-known producer who used to head up Cartemquin and POV before taking on actual films here in the Bay Area. With John Schenk and Bonnie Cohen, who are also in the festival as filmmakers. So these incredible individuals, and all women, how amazing, are going to get together and talk about this state of affairs for documentary film and what needs to happen collectively in terms of economics, buy-in, support from distributors and exhibitions and film festivals, to kind of help us look forward, because it's a really weird time right now in the documentary space.
Yeah, one of the things I took from what you said, a small part of that was the sort of lack of or slowdown in nonfiction film right now. And I immediately thought our reality has become like a fiction. So it's really interesting that those two things are happening at the same time. Whether they're related, chicken egg, I don't know. But I think no matter what is going on in the world, there's always a need for reportorial nonfiction type of storytelling and
Oh,
news and
I
biographies and
absolutely.
things like that. So
Yeah, and that is why I mentioned the fact that when Doc Stories was being created, the idea of creating a space for interrogation and celebration of journalism was important. And so it's been important to me to root this particular program this year in that. Many of our audiences will note that we are not in November, which is traditionally when we hold this festival. We moved to an earlier time in October because of the election. And so to your point, Jeff, that we're living through very interesting times. That has had a bearing on how we have constructed this event. That has had a bearing on the types of films that we were lucky enough to consider for this event. It is definitely influencing the documentary space. And the documentary space is going through seismic changes that were very much known about and have been very evident for years, that the paradigm didn't work in terms of the money that was flowing in, the amount of filmmakers that were being supported, the price points the documentaries were being sold at, the films that were actually breaking through. It's led to a glut of content, and now there's no way to get the content to audiences. There's not that they're not selling. We don't have exhibitors. We don't have distributors that are really focused on helping audiences connect with documentaries. And yet audiences have a huge appetite now for nonfiction. So it is really interesting. And I think that there will be a lot of ground to cover in these two conversations.
awesome. I'm looking forward to those. Okay, so moving on down a couple of maybe lightning round type of things. If you could talk three films that stood out to me again when I looked at the program: Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, Union, and No Other Land. If you can talk, and if you forget which three as you're talking about them, I can remind you.
Thank you. Yeah. We're really excited to have another Raoul Peck film back at Doc Stories. Raoul is an alumni of Doc Stories. We showed I Am Not Your Negro previously. So this is a new film about the South African photographer Ernest Cole, who was very well known at the time for documenting the discrepancies and racism that were a part of apartheid in South Africa. He then came to the US and was deployed in many ways to document the dissonance in our society here in the US as well, especially along racial lines. It's not a spoiler, Ernest Cole has passed. And he kind of died anonymously. He really faded from the collective awareness. And so this film unpacks Ernest's life, but it also looks at what's happened to his work over the years. There's a really interesting twist about who has access to his archives. And Raoul Peck is just such a precise and sophisticated and cerebral filmmaker that then he brings all of that to this film. So it is lush and sumptuous to look at in the way that it's using Ernest Cole's photography. It is everything you would expect from a Raoul Peck film. It is inspirational as well as really revelatory. So we're excited to have that in the lineup.
Can I just add real quickly for listeners who aren't aware, I Am Not Your Negro was the movie he did about James Baldwin. And it's fucking excellent. And please, if you're listening, see that.
It is. I would say it's required viewing. I think it's one of the
Yes.
strongest films that's been made in the documentary space in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so moving along, Union.
Yes. So Union is a really beautiful, powerful, and very timely film that bowed earlier this year at Sundance. These filmmakers are self-distributing, which is also really interesting in terms of the larger conversation we're having about the ecosystem and the landscape for documentaries. It's co-directed by Brett Story and Stephen Meng, who have both successfully done documentary projects on their own in the past. Stephen Meng had Crime and Punishment, and Brett Story is really well known for Hottest August. And so they come together here and they got incredible access to a group of laborers in Staten Island who were attempting to unionize against Amazon, which is notoriously anti-union. The leader is a man named Chris Smalls, who is just this very charismatic individual. And they have incredible access and fly on the wall observation of not just what this group went through, but also the volume of work and collective buy-in it takes to actually unionize. And so not only is the film a really beautiful capsule of of kind of a David and Goliath situation in which the people triumph, but it's very timely for the landscape that we're living in.
I mean, labor is always an issue. I feel like it's getting some play in national politics right now. And also, I don't know what's going to happen, next week or sorry, wherever we are when Doc Stories actually takes place, but we're currently in a port worker strike. So I think it's a very timely and prescient introduction or inclusion in the film festival. So
Yeah, I do think if you don't, like as you say, strikes have become more frequent for us. We went through a period in the United States where we didn't have, labor was kind of on the decline. We didn't hear as much about unions. In the last few years, we've heard a lot more about people trying to unionize or striking in a variety of different industries. Obviously, in the film and entertainment industry, two very famous strikes that happened last year. And so I think if you are interested in what happens at Amazon, if you're interested in the mechanics of unionizing, or if you're just interested in a really beautiful, inspirational story, this is for you.
check, check, check for me. Okay, the last one, No Other Land. Also, just I'll let you talk, but it stood out to me.
Yeah, this is such an amazing film. It's made by a collective of four filmmakers, two Palestinian filmmakers and two Israeli filmmakers, Yuval Abraham, Bassel Adra, Hamdan Belal, and Rachel Sor. And the four of them came together to document what was happening to a Palestinian village that was living under a lot of violence, and how that is kind of a microcosm of the larger conflicts that are playing out within Palestine and Israel that is obviously very much in the news. The events in the film predate the events of October 7th from last year, but it is a very good example of how fraught and complicated this situation is, made by people who are of both communities who found a way to come together to tell this story. It is only, it's only continued to become more and more and more relevant, obviously, as the conflict and the war that's happening right now has continued to escalate. And so it's a little bit challenging to talk about this film. Obviously, this is a really charged subject, and what's so incredibly powerful about the film is that it was made by a collective. It was made by Israelis and Palestinians who are continuing to work together to document what's happening in their communities and in their homeland. And it won the jury prize and the audience award at Berlinale, which was earlier this year, but post the events of October 7th. So I think it's a film that welcomes a lot of people to come in and to view the story as it unfolds. We are co-presenting the presentation of No Other Land with the Arab Film and Media Institute and with the Jewish Film Institute here in San Francisco. We're deeply grateful to both the organizations for their partnership, and both of the organizations believe in the film and wanted to be a part of that presentation, which I think speaks volumes about what the film is able to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I have a handful of friends who either live in or visit that region, and one of the things, probably the first thing I always hear is like people on the ground, we're neighbors, Yes, our governments are doing these things in our name, but we have no issue with each other. And so I feel like on its face, just the fact that this movie was made with two Israelis and two Palestinians says a lot, but then it's like, what I think it's going to show is the truth that I keep hearing is and
Yeah.
that's probably true all over the world. Like it's a huge issue. We don't have to get into it right now, but it's like I appreciate that the movie is included because I feel like the reality on the ground is what is not always seen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want
So
to disabuse people who might be interested in this. Like, it definitely shows violence, it shows escalation. It definitely shows how this particular Palestinian village is increasingly dealing with struggles. And so it was, I think, these filmmakers started documenting their lives and this began happening. And so they all three of the four filmmakers appear in front of camera. They shot this themselves. They all believed in the project. As I mentioned, they won two awards at Berlinale, and there's been a very strong response to the film, and they believe deeply in this work. They were going to be with us in person. I do want to share an update that because of the recent events of the last few days, and knowing that we're pre-recording this, but we're talking at the beginning of October. So because of the recent events, the filmmakers have decided to return home to be with their families and their communities. So they unfortunately won't be with us on the ground to talk about their work, but we are very grateful that they made the work and that they are sharing it with our audience. It was hugely important to SFFILM that we were able to bring this title to the Bay Area and share it with our audiences.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean this, I don't mean to diminish this. It's a huge get, I think, for the festival. It's important to me that it's going to be there.
Yeah, we
I'm
wanted to
happy
show
about
the
it.
film in April, right after Berlinale, and so we're very grateful that the team working around the film has been engaged with us since then, and that this felt like the right place and time to show the film. And it's a charged and challenging film to talk about because it's up against ever evolving real life conflict that we see in the news every day. But I do think, there is some examples in the film that cause for celebration and inspiration. And I also think that the film will just help deepen understanding. And like you were talking earlier, help build constructive dialogue for community. And, obviously that's a bold thing for me to say. But I think that there is that potential within this film.
Okay, well, I don't want to leave anything out that might be on your mind before we get to the last thing I want to talk about. Is there anything else programming wise, movie wise, about this year's Stock Stories that you wanted to mention?
I mean, obviously, I want to talk about every single title. And when I don't talk about titles, I feel terrible. We only have 10 features and 2
Pick
shorts.
your favorite child, Jessie.
I mean, it is so hard. It is so hard to make the decision about what titles are included. We're trying to achieve a lot with a very short time frame and very few slots. It is a political season, so there is a lot of content out there right now that talks about social justice issues and political commentary, and also people want to see uplifting and inspirational films, and so we're trying to do all of that in a very small program. And I just want to reiterate how immensely grateful we are to every filmmaker who shares their work with us, because this is an invite-only showcase. There's not an open submission process. And again, it's only in its 10th year. So there are a lot of filmmakers that really believe in what value add SFFILM has by sharing their film with us, especially before it sells. And they also really love Bay Area audience. They get such a warm reception from the people that come and watch the films. And that's a huge credit to the audience here in the Bay Area. So thank you for making filmmakers feel welcome. And thank you to the filmmakers for sharing your work with us. I think what's really interesting, we have 2 really interesting shorts blocks that are really reflective of kind of the state of the world. One specifically focuses on the persistence of dreams and kind of what it is to move to another place and pursue your authentic self. The other shorts block focuses on what it is to be a woman right now and kind of a lot of different global situations. They're very timely and there's a lot of very talented filmmakers involved. And I think the shorts blocks get overlooked sometimes because we have kind of known feature titles coming in. So I would encourage people to look at the shorts blocks. It's a wonderful way to go in and get a snippet of what's happening in the short form documentary space and to be inspired and challenged. And some of them will definitely make you laugh out loud. I also want to call out, I think what is really unintentional, but one of the beautiful things that happens in curation is there's a thematic reverberation, between our opening and our closing night film. So we're opening with 1-to-1, John and Yoko, which is Kevin McDonald's new film that looks at a specific time period in John Lennon and Yoko Ono's life. And it shows remastered concert footage from the only full concert John Lennon ever did after he left the Beatles, that was remastered by their son, actually. But it's not a music documentary, and it's not even like a biopic about John and Yoko. Kevin McDonald and his co-director employ a really genius editorial construction that makes the film feel like a mixtape that looks through kind of the paranoia and political radicalization and national mood in the early 1970s that is so eerily reminiscent to the times that we're living through right now. And those thematics are also very much baked into Robinson DeVore's closing night film, Suburban Fury, which is also fascinating. Both 1-to-1, the opening night film, and closing night film, Suburban Fury, are doing very interesting things with form and pushing what documentaries can be. Suburban Fury, which is the closing night film, is a film that we actually supported with a grant 10 years ago when it was a narrative film. This film has been 12 years in the making. It is fascinating. I've never seen a documentary filmed with this type of artistic direction. It's about Sarah Jane Moore, who attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford here in San Francisco in 1975. And it is about her grooming by the FBI and her political awakening and how she got to the point where she was in Union Square with a gun. And it is told completely from her perspective. She is the main subject in the film. I've never seen anything like it. And also it has those thematics of paranoia and distrust in institutions and political unrest. And so they're both really beautiful films. They really showcase what you can do with documentary, and it's just like an echo of what we're living through now. So that's unintentional. That's what happened. And those are the films that we have for opening and clothing. But I wouldn't miss them.
Excellent. I'm sold.
Good.
So great job there. I do want to close with, in your voice, the details, the nitty gritty. When does it start? When does it end? Where are the films taking place? And where can folks go to check out the program and buy tickets?
It's so thoughtful of you. Thank you for setting me up to close with that. So the 2024 10th anniversary edition of Doc Stories is happening October 17th through the 20th. We are exclusively at the Vogue Theater for all of the screenings and for the 2 talks. The talks are free and open to the public. There is one exception. We are doing a workshop, which is on film and activism specifically for teens, and that is going to be at the SFFILM House in Soma. You can find out information about all of the screenings at the Vogue, about the 2 free talks, and about the teen workshop at sffilm.org and buy your tickets. They are currently on sale. We are just so thrilled to have a moment to celebrate 10 years of this festival and all of the incredible films that are going to be showcased as we look forward to the next 10 years of Doc Stories. We look forward to seeing you all on the ground.
That was Jessie Fairbanks from SFFILM. Check back next week for part 2 with Aaron Peskin. That drops next Tuesday, wherever you get podcasts. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Our contributing producer is Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 7th season, we have more than 220 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If possible, please rate and review the show. I want to know what you think. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at storiedsf, and reach out to us there or email us at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Be extra careful crossing the street, and keep being wacky, creative, and kind out there. See you next time on Storied San Francisco. We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.